Okay, so first of all, big first order of business is to welcome everybody back to our first Security of Things meetup in a while, a number of months. We kind of, like everybody else in the world, got thrown off our game a little bit by the COVID pandemic. We've had a couple kind of sessions during the pandemic, but Jeff and I were talking and, really interested in getting things going again, kickstarting the meeting. There's just so much interesting stuff going on in the IoT and security space. And so getting this really great group of folks together and talking again in 2023. And so I wanted to thank everybody for tuning in. We will, as you heard, be recording this, and I'll post it to our YouTube page and share around the link after the fact. I also have put together a short survey for the folks who are here to take, if you want, to tell us just a little bit about what you're up to and also what you're interested in for 2023. There are a whole IoT security is a huge space. There are a lot of different directions we can go in terms of what topics we just choose to discuss. And so I kind of pick your brain about some of those. But with here's kind of a quick breakdown. So we're sort of in the intro remarks, general business side of things, and what I would say is, obviously, how to reach me via the platform, and also you can always shoot me an email at paul@securityofthings.com or paul@securityledger.com, whichever you prefer. And if you have any questions or suggestions, recommendations, let me know. One of the things the forum asks about is sponsors, and if you're working for a company who might be interested in sponsoring one of our meetups, let me know about that as well. So the next order of business is to introduce our amazing guest this week, Mike Nelson, who's the Vice President of Internet of Things Security at Digicert. Mike and I have talked a number of times over the year. Digicert has been a sponsor of Security Ledger, and it's just and actually secures Security Ledger as well as some of my other properties. So yes, so an amazing CA that is thinking in a very broad way about security and the internet of things, and has been way out in front on IoT for a while. So we're really thrilled to have Mike with us. Mike, kind of took a high level. You're going to talk in more detail about the things you do, but generally you're the VP of IoT security. You oversee the company's strategic IoT market development for critical infrastructure industries. Former HHS, Department of Health and Human Services employee, also worked at GE Healthcare, Levitt Partners, particularly passionate about security, cybersecurity, and medical devices. It's just one part of the IoT and security space, and one that we've talked about here before as well. And then this, if you guys, I'll come back to this at the end of the talk, and you can scan it or go to the Google survey. But that's actually all I had. Jeff, do you have any other things to talk to the group about?
Nope, just glad that we're back doing this again. So
yeah, me too. Me too. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton to Mike. And Mike, you should be able to share.
Yeah, it's asking. It's saying it's disabled right now. So
okay, try it now.
There we go. All right. Now, are you seeing the presenter slide, or are you seeing the full screen?
Full screen.
Awesome.
Yep. Well, not the presenter slide. So yeah, you got it right.
Yeah. Good. Well, it's good to be with you, Paul. Thanks for the introduction, and just love the work you do to promote awareness of security, and we just can't do it enough. And as your audience knows, the threat landscape continues to rapidly expand, and I think IoT is a big part of that. I titled what I'm talking about today, the state of IoT security, but really we're going to dive into some components of IoT security, specifically around a new industry standard, which I think has the opportunity to really influence where IoT security for connected devices is going to be going. And I'm excited to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on, the national perspective around, not just nationally, but globally around labeling with IoT. I'm curious to get your thoughts as to whether or not you guys think that will be impactful. But as Paul said, I'm the Vice President of IoT Security at Digicert. I've been here for just over 8 years and have been in IoT the whole time. They actually hired me for healthcare. For my knowledge, I had come from GE Healthcare and had done some consulting. I've got a really interesting set of experience on the policy side, working to in healthcare, one of the big challenges was adoption of technology and using it in ways that enables and enhances patient care and doing it in a way that was secure. And that's really where I started to see the first, and this was, early 2000s, where I started to see the vulnerabilities and the lack of security that was prominent in a lot of medical devices. And then I jumped out to GE and worked on the development of some products and software systems that were used there, and then consulted. And then Digicert called and said, hey, we know we have great security, but we don't know anything about healthcare or connected devices. Can you come help us? And I decided to join Digicert, and it's been a really fun and great ride. Digicert, as you said, Paul, we're a leader in what we call digital trust. And digital trust is really the foundation of the connected world. As we engage in connectivity, whether that be through the internet or through VPNs at the office, or we're signing code, or we're signing digital documents, whatever it is that we're doing in a connected way needs to make sure that trust is there. And that is really our mission, and what we're trying to accomplish is to ensure that the connected world can be trusted. And we're the largest provider of trust solutions globally. We help organizations to secure users, to secure servers within their enterprise. We help development teams to secure their DevOps processes with our code signing and the solutions that we have to bring good security solutions there. We have a robust platform to help secure digital documents and objects. The space that I play in, and what we're going to be talking about today, though, is devices and what we call the Internet of Things. And we call our solution here, I want to set the stage because we call it Digicert for Connected Devices. And when we refer to devices, it's not just the edge device. You have to think about IoT holistically with the ecosystem. You have to think about the gateways that are connecting to your edge devices. You need to think about the connection from the gateway or the device to the cloud, and making sure that data that's being transferred to the cloud is secure. You need to think about the servers that are sending updates. That entire ecosystem, it's really important to ensure that there is security. And we at Digicert have a very comprehensive solution that helps organizations with all of that, whether you're in the development and you're signing firmware or software that's going to the device, whether you're standing up a device in the field and you're getting an operational certificate on that to ensure ongoing secure communication, or ongoing maintenance of those and being able to do updates and renew credentials. We help all of our customers to cover that lifespan, the life cycle, all of those security solutions within the life cycle of a device. When I look at IoT security, I categorize, I get asked a lot, whose responsibility is it? And I see 3 pillars of responsibility for IoT security. And these are they. The first is government. Government can lead out and can drive adoption of good security by mandating it. And we're starting to see that. The second one is industry, where industries can say, hey, look, there's no regulation here, but we know we have a problem. We need to come together, collaborate to say, we're going to raise the bar of security in the industry. And what we're talking about today with Matter is a good example of that. And then independent of government or industry doing that, we also see manufacturers, just because they're doing the right thing and they're trying to get ahead of the problems that might be coming. We see manufacturers and operators, those who are buying and onboarding devices, starting to require good security in their development process. And we see operators starting to do things like procurement language to say, we're only going to buy devices that have these security qualifications. Those are all good things. And I think that we're starting to see in each of these buckets positive movement that is encouraging to me that the industry is starting to wake up to address the problems of insecurity. As I said, on the regulatory front, just a screenshot here, all of the blue dots here on this map are governments that are proactively putting in place regulation for security. Here in the US, the IoT Cybersecurity Improvement Act that was put into law in 2020 is a great start for the US. They're using the government's purchasing power to say, if we're going to buy a device, whether it's the Department of Transportation or Energy, if they're going to buy a device, it has to meet certain security requirements. Using the purchasing power of the government is a great way to move market. And that's a great way to tip a market to start doing the right things. I applaud the government for the work that they've done there and working closely with NIST. Australia has some voluntary IoT practices. Recently, we saw the EU come out with the first regulation that actually will implement a penalty for those who are not willing to comply with security. It'll be really interesting to see how that plays out in the coming years. But I'm encouraged what we're seeing. We need more of this. Regulation is sometimes scary. Those of us in industry who look at regulation, they're like, well, regulators are out of touch. And I agree with that. But I think that what we're seeing with the regulation is a really careful approach to not be too prescriptive. They're doing things like eliminate hard-coded credentials, make sure that devices can be updated. They're not telling you exactly how to do it, but they're giving higher level guidance that I think are reflective of good security practices and don't get too prescriptive. They let the industry figure out how to do that. But I'm really encouraged with what we're seeing from a regulatory perspective. And I think we'll continue to see this. I think you'll see more and more countries come together. I also think you'll start to see some harmonization of these practices. One of the challenges and complaints we hear from our customers is the regulations are so different. So if you're selling devices in India, the regulations there are different than in the UK, and they have to know how to navigate and handle each of those differently. So I think one of the other things that we'll see in the next year or so is more harmonization of these regulations so that it reduces the burden of compliance for global manufacturers. If we look at industry, so the second pillar was industry. This is a list now. Granted, this list is ones that Digicert is actively involved in to develop standards for these industries. But we're starting to see a lot of them come together to say, we have a problem and we need to start acting to do the right things to make sure security is in place. You see a lot of movement in smart home or commercial buildings, transportation with electric vehicles. Society of Automotive Engineers is doing some really neat things to ensure that this infrastructure that you guys know is being stood up. Charging stations are popping up everywhere in homes, commercial buildings, gas stations, to make sure that those devices that are connected are secure. But I also think we'll continue to see more activity here. I think healthcare has some things going on, but I think we're going to see some stronger groups come together in the near future to really tackle some problems in the industry that that regulation is not going to solve. So I'm really encouraged here, and this is where I'm going to transition to talk about the topic at hand today, which is Matter. For those of you who are not aware of Matter, let me just state the problem that Matter is trying to solve. So at the Nelson household, we have a handful of connected devices. We have a smart garage, we have a smart a doorbell that has a camera, we have Alexas throughout our home, we have smart sprinkler system. The problem is when I set all these up, I was really hopeful that my virtual assistant Alexa would be able to control and help me to create automation with the smart devices in my home. And what I learned was there is a very different, it's a very different experience. Today, there's clunkiness with interoperability. Some devices work with Alexa, some work with Google Home, some work with the Apple device. Samsung has one, and there's very I went to Best Buy recently, and it was really interesting. Below every TV, it's like, this device works with Google Home and Alexa, but does not work with these systems. There's a dramatic lack of interoperability amongst smart home devices. And smart connected devices was one of the fastest growing IoT industries. Consumers are buying these products off the shelf rapidly, and they're starting to take a prominent position in our life. So the Project Matter was launched just over 3 years ago. And Apple, Google, and Amazon came together and they said, look, we have a problem. Our consumers are complaining that our virtual assistants can't control all of the devices that they're onboarding. And they said, what if we came together and created a standard that had a common layer, a communication layer that allowed all devices that were compliant with the standard to seamlessly interoperate and communicate with each other? And they all said, yeah, let's do it. And they formed Project Matter. The founding members of the project, there today are north of 300. It says 250 on this. They just crossed 300. Smart home manufacturers who have said, we want to support that. And they are all jumping in to become compliant with the Matter standard. And so Matter is all about interoperability, simplicity of onboarding devices for consumers. As you can imagine, if you have that common framework and that interoperability with devices, onboarding, and then the user experience is going to be much simplified. The reliability of those devices will be improved. And the great thing that I'm excited to say is Matter also has a security working group, and part of the Matter specification or standard is security approaches, and I'm going to dive into those. I believe that Matter is a blueprint that can be followed in other industries as well. It's starting with a smart home. The Connectivity Standard Alliance is the organizing body of this standard. It was previously known as the Zigbee Alliance. Some of you may have known or be familiar with the Zigbee Alliance, but the Connectivity Standard Alliance has been the one who has organized and driven this standard to completion. And in October of this year, Matter 1.0 was released. I have here the Matter logo. So devices that are compliant with the Matter standard are actually going to get the Matter mark, and it will go on these devices. So as consumers are shopping, they can see that. And what we believe is that that brand or that mark is going to become known as a trusted brand. If you as a consumer look at that, you can know that, one, it's going to be interoperable, it's going to be easier to work with, and it also has security best practices as part of it. We believe that it's going to become as commonplace as Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and other prominent marks that we see on different products. Now I'd like to transition and talk about, I said that Matter is doing security. I'd like to spend a couple minutes highlighting the things that Matter is doing to raise the bar for security with connected devices in the smart home. The first thing that they're doing is they have a protocol for easy, secure, and flexible commissioning, and making sure that the user experience when you're turning on a device and you're connecting it to your virtual assistant, that it's an easy process. And that is going to have dramatic improvement. And the way that they're doing that is using things like device attestation certificates that has a very strong identity, and using that identity to recognize, validate, and enter that device into a trusted network so it can communicate. Validation that each device is authentic and certified. As I said, every device that is Matter compliant will receive a certificate. And that certificate, in order to get that, you have to go through a validation process to say, I'm a trusted manufacturer. We've done the right things. We've checked all the boxes. And because of that, we can now issue trusted certificates that come from trusted roots. And it validates that each of those devices come from trusted manufacturers and can be trusted. A really interesting security approach that we have not seen with other industry standards is the compliance ledger. This is a really interesting approach where instead of doing it on a server, they're actually using a ledger to attest the validity of devices. And so when all of all of the credentials and the identity of devices are stored on the compliance ledger, and it acts as a distributed ledger that allows rapid identification and verification of trust. I mentioned strong identity. With any IoT deployment, identity is so important, and Matter has done a really good job to have some unique identifiers that are secure and cannot be compromised to ensure that every device, whether that be a gateway, whether that be a doorbell, has a unique identifier and can be identified and can be trusted. And then communication, they're using secure encryption to encrypt data within the network. Now, right now, encryption to the cloud is not included as part of the protocol, but I can tell you that that is actively being worked on and will be part of the next release of Matter. Access control, so you think about password practices, multi-factor authentication, and what they're requiring there to ensure that that users and that bad actors can't get in. I think what Matter is doing here is really good. And then the final two are, again, security best practices, secure updates, making sure that devices have the ability to be updated, so credentials and firmware and everything can be updated. But then also validating the integrity of software, doing through practices like code signing. So those of you who are secure, I'm guessing most of you here are security professionals. This really is not new approaches. This is implementing security best practices that work. And that's what I'm so excited about, is that they are requiring that manufacturers that are compliant with this standard do that. And I think it's going to be a great thing. Now, some of you may be wondering, what's Digicert's role in Matter? So we have been involved with Matter from the very beginning. We got invited as the largest trust company to come and help make sure that the standard that was developed could be trusted. And public key infrastructure and the use of authentication certificates, what they call device attestation certificates, is part of that. And I just wanted to quickly show the root hierarchy, because the magic of Project Matter really comes down to the roots, the trusted roots that will be used within Matter. The image on the left here is a fun graphical representation of, we always think about roots and edge devices through the model of a tree. And so we've done a digital tree here to show that. But at the very bottom is what Matter calls product attestation authorities. And these are the trusted roots. There will be a handful of providers. Digicert was the first to become a trusted root or a product attestation authority within Matter. Those who provide those trusted roots have to go through a handful of requirements to say, we are following these protocols, we are compliant with the certificate policy. We have to undergo annual audits to show that we are maintaining compliance with the expectations and the governance policies within the certificate policy of Matter. From those trusted roots, we will issue intermediate CAs, what Matter refers to as product attestation intermediates. Every manufacturer that is a member of the Connectivity Standard Alliance and is working towards compliance with Matter is required to get a product attestation intermediate. And this identifies them as a trusted vendor, someone who has achieved compliance with the spec, and it gives them the ability to then issue the final top part of our chain, which is the device attestation certificates. Like any PKI infrastructure, the trust comes from the root. And so those roots are stored in very secure ways. We protect those to make sure that they're not compromised. We handle the issuance of intermediates in very secure ways, and we manage those. And then, of course, the device attestation certificates also inherit the trustworthiness of the root and the ICA. And this is how, as you look at this, as you onboard devices in your home, every Matter approved device will have a signature from one of the trusted roots. And with that trusted signature, it can then reach out to devices from other manufacturers and say, do you have a signature from one of the trusted roots? And if it does, it can then securely communicate with that device and open a secure channel where it can then be properly identified as trusted and it can then open secure communication, and it can work. And many of the devices can even be then controlled by the virtual assistants. The roots and the PKI of Matter is really the magic that enables that interoperability that I've talked about. All right, so that's Project Matter. And as I mentioned, Matter has a labeling component. I now like to shift and talk a little bit about Matter, or about labeling. It's a really hot topic right now in the industry, and I'm really curious to know, Paul, I know we had talked about maybe doing a poll. I don't know if you have the ability to launch that simple poll. I just am curious to know, of those of you on the call, whether or not you think IoT labeling can be effective. Just a simple yes or no. And if we can't get a poll up, maybe you guys can just go
Hold
to.
on.
Okay.
How do you, let me just see here. Can I get a poll?
If not, we can just ask them to go into the chat and you can just tell me yes or no.
Yeah, or you can put your hand up, I guess, in your, that'll be one way to do the poll as well, is kind of throw your hand up. And the question again, Mike, was
the question is, do you believe IoT security labeling can be effective? Very, I'm requiring you, there's a lot underneath that, but I'm requiring you to make a stance on that. Do you think
IoT labeling be effective?
All right. Okay. I'm seeing some yeses. I'm seeing some thumbs up.
Yes. Jeff says yes. Others?
Okay.
Or you can go in the chat as well. So So
Rodney's saying no.
Yeah.
All right. So let's jump in, and I'm really excited to open the question and answer. I'd like to get through my presentations because I think the discussion is always more fun. But we did a survey recently that was really interesting. We asked the survey participants if they would be willing to switch vendors following a loss of digital trust.
Yeah. So
if there's a compromise with the device that you're using, or if you knew that a product had better security, would you be willing to switch brands? And 87% of respondents said they would be willing to switch knowing that another product had better security. That is a really powerful statistic, in my opinion, that consumers are willing to do that. I think what that's showing is that they're aware that their data, their personal information could become compromised. And they are realizing that that can create a lot of chaos in their lives, and that they're beginning to say, we're willing to make purchases based on security, which I think is why the timing of the labeling discussion that the White House has been driving is really relevant. I think we're at a point now where consumers generally are aware that some devices are secure and some are not. So the White House, as you guys may be aware of, recently convened a group, Google, Apple, the Connectivity Standard Alliance, Carnegie Mellon. There were a lot of organizations that were invited, Samsung, a bunch of others that were invited to go to the White House to kick off a discussion about labeling. The White House has commissioned NIST to do some work on security for IoT. And what they have said is that whatever the labeling program that comes out next year, it's going to build on the foundational work that NIST has done. It's not going to be counter to that. It also is going to follow the executive order on improving the nation's cybersecurity. They have said that in the spring of next year, that voluntary labeling can begin, and that they plan to have a program. So it's coming, and it's coming in the near future. And the other thing that they have said is that they want it to be simple. Okay. Now, there's a lot underneath that. I have mixed feelings on labeling. Me as a security expert, I look at some of the labels and I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this information. I love seeing it. Yeah. But then I ask myself the question, if I put that in front of my mother, who can barely get her Mac computer, she calls me like every third day and is like, hey, Mike, I have to help her. So can my mother, I always say, does it pass the mom sniff? Like, can my mom do that? And there's a lot of things that I think need to be considered around labeling that it would be really easy to get labeling wrong. The first is that security cannot be static. the labels have to be live, because you could buy a device today and you could go home and a researcher may have found a new vulnerability that was not previously known. And so whatever the label is, I believe that it needs to have the ability to be updated in a live manner. So whether that be a QR code or a link to a website where data is actually live and it can continuously be updated. I think that's a really important component of labeling. Security is not binary. It has to continually be updated. And I also think that the labeling has to be flexible. It has to be, it has to allow for manufacturers who are continuous, like today they may not be secure, but they may do a release in a month that improves their security. How do you accommodate that? And so there has to be flexibility, updatability to ensure that those labels can be changed. You know, they also have to work with, you know, I believe that they have to work with established regulations, laws. They can't go counter to that. And so I love that the White House is pointing to the work that they're doing with NIST and the executive order to say, look, those things will be foundational to whatever labeling approach comes out. Now, here's a couple of labels. I just wanted to throw these out there to get your guys's, you know, think about it, and then you can ask questions or throw mud at them. But on the left is the labeling approach that is being used by Singapore, and Singapore has actually partnered with a handful of other countries that are using a similar, the 4-star approach. They have 4 different levels, and each level means that they've done something else. The first 2 are really self-attestation. It's not requiring an independent party to come in and look at it. It's just requiring it's a self-attestation, which I'm always like, I'd never want to trust that. I don't, as a security professional, I'd want some validation that those things have been tested by an independent party. The top 2 are approach that. But I think that star approach, to me, my mom might not understand the details underneath the 4 stars, but if it receives 4 stars in security, at least I think she can digest that. And I think that achieves the simplicity. Now, the one here in the middle, I don't want to rain on Carnegie Mellon. I think that they did a lot of work on this, but I believe that the complexity is too much here. I think that it's offering too much. And this is, of course, Mike Nelson's opinion. This is not Digicert's opinion. This is my opinion. But I believe that labeling needs to be more simple. I can digest this and I can read this, but I don't think the average consumer has the knowledge of security and what security best practices are to really be able to understand all of the details. Now, the one on the right is what I've been talking about, which is Matter. And this, similar to what, you know, I would say that this is on the far other end of the spectrum where it provides no content. What Matter is hoping is that this label becomes known as a symbol of interoperability and trust. And so, you know, if people are interested, they can, and Matter is talking about having QR codes that you can scan and you can go and you can get additional information on security and the other components of the standard. And I think that's the right approach. I think being able to see a brand like this and knowing that there is a security architecture behind it that makes that device able to be trusted. I'll finish on labeling by saying it is my personal opinion as well that I believe consumers have the right to assume security of the devices they're purchasing. So for me, as I go into a hospital and let's say something happened to my daughter or to myself, and I see her get hooked up to an IV machine that I know is insecure. Now, me as a security professional, I might be like, oh, I'd rather use this device than that. But what I want to emphasize is I believe the responsibility in those situations is with the manufacturer. Consumers have the right to assume the security of the devices that they are using in their homes and that are being used on them in medical systems or cars or nuclear power plants or water systems. I mean, the water hack that happened in Florida several months ago, I mean, it could have been really disastrous. We need to make sure that consumers can trust the devices. And that's where I'll end by saying the burden is on the security industry and on manufacturers and on you know, if you're a hospital or if you're a plant and you're buying and onboarding devices, we need to build security into the DNA in the way we build devices so that consumers can trust them. The responsibility is with those who are building and selling those devices. Consumers don't have the ability to, most of them don't even struggle to set up two-factor authentication. And so we need to realize that and make sure that we are doing the right things, and we're encouraging our customers that they're doing the right things to make sure that these devices that are going out into consumers' homes. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I wear a pump and a glucose monitor on me at all times. Knowing that those things are secure is peace of mind, and consumers deserve that. I put some links here. Paul, I'll share these with you. It's just some additional information on Matter, on what the Connectivity Standard Alliance is doing. They can dig in there, and also some things that we published around digital trust. Would love to share that with your users. Having said that, now the fun part. I'd love to stop and then open up for any question and have dialogue with your audience.
Thank you so much. Really great presentation, Mike. I've got a bunch of questions. I'm sure our attendees do as well. So if you have a question, I think either let me know in the chat or raise your hand, and I can we can unmute you. And yeah, okay, so hold on. Rodney has one.
Great question.
Yeah,
that's a great question. Rodney's question is, are Matter devices required to support only Matter, or can they support another, perhaps less secure protocol? So there are a lot of protocols, Zigbee, and I mean, there are a ton of them. So it does not prevent them from supporting other protocols. And so, they are talking about portability to be able to support both of them. And that is something that there's a working group. I'm not actively involved in that, but I know that that Matter is not the only protocol that can be supported.
And obviously there's a lot of gear and product already out there, right? A lot of legacy stuff that it's going to need to interface with.
Yeah.
How is that going to work? Do you know, Mike, with the legacy IoT stuff?
Yeah. So you look at Amazon, they have millions of devices already out in the field. And what they have communicated is they want all their devices to be Matter compliant. The beautiful thing is they can do that. And so Matter allows devices in the field to be updated to become Matter compliant. Now, what they won't get is the mark, right? So what is happening, I just received on a device that I'm using, I received a notification that Matter compliance is coming, and that the next update, my device will become Matter compliant. That was so cool for me to see that on the device. And so devices that are already in the field can be updated. And then, of course, new devices that are coming off the manufacturing line will receive the mark.
So if you've got questions, feel free to either raise your hand and unmute yourself, or just throw them into the chat, and I can relay them to Mike that way. So Mike, I guess one of the things that I would wonder always is, what is going to compel device makers to embrace a protocol and an ecosystem like Matter versus ignore it, given that it may add cost, it may complicate development in ways. What is the stick or the carrot that's going to get them to move off of what they're doing and embrace a new protocol like Matter?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a great book out there on industry collaboration called, I think it's called Finding Allies, Building Alliances, or something like that. But they lay out 8 characteristics that are essential to effective collaboration. And one of them touches on what you're talking about, Paul, and it's the importance of conveners of stature. And then having industry buy-in is the next one. Yeah. So what it means by conveners of stature is, I can imagine if 3 startup manufacturers in the smart home space got together at CES a couple of years ago, and were like, hey guys, we really want to create a standard that makes our devices work with Alexa. The industry would never pay attention to that, right? Sadly, they might have a good idea, but sadly they don't. I'll tell you what, though, when Samsung, Apple, Google, and Amazon get in a room and they say, hey, guys, we're doing this, people listen.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the significance of the people that they were able to convene, I mean, they got Panasonic, as I said, Samsung, Siemens, Assa Abloy. I mean, the list, it's now 300 plus, it's 300 strong. Everybody is jumping in because they're like, we're missing the train. If we don't jump on this now, we're going to be left out, and our products are going to be the only ones that don't work. And so having conveners of stature and then recruiting and having enough participation from the industry to say, we're doing this together, I believe is the magic that really gets it. And it's evident, Paul, because there have been other organizations who have tried doing this in the smart home space, and they failed. They've been trying for the last, I don't know how long they've been around, but they have tried, and Matter and the force of this effort just jumped right ahead of them, because what they're trying to do and the players.
I remember IoT protocol, IoT standards or standard IoT platforms being discussed, 10, 15 years ago, I mean, in very earliest days of even talking about the Internet of Things, there was this notion of like, well, we need standards, we need to get everybody on the same, protocol and platform. And yet we have defied that, and yet the Internet of Things is growing, but I think probably you would agree, not as smoothly or as well as it could be. Talk about like, let's imagine, okay, Rodney has another question, which I'll get to after my question.
Good one.
Talk, if you could kind of give us a vision for what the world looks like. Let's imagine, 5 years hence, Matter has really taken root, is broadly adopted from the kind of consumer or business standpoint. What capabilities are there that are not there? And I mean, I think we all know what the present day is like, which is you've got all different types of connected devices. They're using all different protocols. They've all got their own separate, siloed management interfaces, and it's just kind of a mess. They don't talk to each other. It's all just very disorganized. So what does the future, a Matter future, look like, and how is it different?
Yeah, so from a consumer, it's going to improve dramatically your experience. Now, for me, I in my smart home, I decided to select Control 4. I don't know if you're familiar with Control 4, but it's a technology that actually goes out and does what Matter does, right? They go and they create interoperability with all your devices, and it makes it so that you can control them, and it's really good technology. But Matter is going to, in some ways, do that through the virtual assistants. Now, Amazon, my Alexa, should be able to do that same thing. It should be able to make that experience for me as a consumer much more seamless and easy to set up a real smart home that has configurations and allows me to do things with all of the devices in my home, and to have visibility, transparency, and control of those through that. And to me as a consumer, that's really exciting. And I think that when those devices came to market, that was the vision. But I think, creating integrations with 300 smart home, it's not easy, right? It's not an easy thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that those products, they started with that mindset of we want to get there, but then they realized how hard it was. And then what started to happen is that they would create silos. Google would say, well, these are our devices, we're going to control these. And Amazon said, well, these are our devices. But now they're taking those walls down and they're saying, no, we're all gonna work together on that. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Okay, so we got a couple questions in the chat. Rodney, I can read it, or you can ask it if you want. But I think you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, if everyone can hear me.
Yeah.
There was a previous sort of consortium that sort of still there, OCS, and they had also AllJoyn. They acquired AllJoyn. And it was sort of a home appliance, sort of home protocol that would allow this sort of interoperability between devices. But it seemed to be the way that it was implemented, despite having really large names behind it, the manufacturers appeared to not desire to have their competition be able to join the network or interoperate.
That's right.
And so that kind of killed, that seemed to have put a big hurdle on OCF adoption.
Yeah.
Can the same thing happen with Matter, where you sort of get these domains where we're going to get our Apple domain and our Alexa domain and Google domain, and they don't really want to actually interact, and so you will still see a division. Is that still possible with Matter?
Well, Matter will, so, I mean, Amazon will still have their domain, but what will happen is the interoperability with the devices. And so instead of just having, 30 devices that they work with, they'll be able to interoperate with any device that achieves Matter compliance. And so, I mean, Amazon has a lot of technology in the smart home space. Their sidewalk tech, I mean, they've got a lot of stuff that they're doing. And so I would say they still have their domain, but what it does is it opens up their virtual assistant to enable much greater control, interoperability, customability for end consumers. And so it will dramatically improve that. So you mentioned OCF, and thank you for doing that. I didn't mention him by name, but yeah, OCF had really great intentions, and they had pretty good industry participation, but it died on the vine because of those problems that you spoke to.
Yeah. Mike also has a question. Mike, do you want to just ask it, or do you want me to read it? Hey, we can hear you.
Yeah, so
Oops, sorry.
I'll let him voice up.
You there, Mike?
Yeah. You can answer the question.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I saw it, Mike. It's a good question. It's a fair question, and I'll get confirmation on this. But if it does that, then it would not. So if there's something that would make a downgrade attack possible, then I would not think that would be allowed to be compliant. And I can go back to the working group on that to confirm that answer. But my belief on that would be that it would not be able to support that.
If the protocol is insecure, then presumably, like, it could upload some new software that compromised everything, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I'm assuming that with the attestation that's built in, that you could only run attested software. So even if you were an insecure device, I assume you could force the system would not run software. Maybe your device could, but the system would not run software that wasn't attested.
Yeah, I mean, that's the intention of that, right? You validate the identity, you make sure that you have the verification, the right credentials, and then it opens secure operational, what we call operational certificates, which then allow you to do things like secure update. And so, if there's a protocol that I mean, it would have to work within that protocol. And it's because all updates and whatnot of those devices will be using that Matter protocol. And so when device is updated, it's going to use the Matter security to do that. So if it's supporting other protocols, they would have to support that as well.
Or just have lesser capability. In other words, you can let people into a building who don't have access to everything, can't turn the heating system on and off.
That's right. Yeah.
So.
Yep. Access control. Yep. Good question.
Mike, what does it mean from the perspective of Digicert, the certificate authority, the identity verifier here? What is this going to mean practically? And obviously, we know, one of the problems with the Internet of Things is one of the guiding principles has been sort of to make it frictionless, really, smooth deployment by, opening all your communication ports and having easy default passwords and things that have created a lot of security headaches.
Yeah.
As you add security and resilience, you also add a little bit of friction. How do we avoid that conundrum of, stuff breaking and people not knowing what's going on or how to fix it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think that the way you do that is carefully stepping into the protocol and making sure that the protocols are well baked and that they are tested and that they work. And I can tell you, I have been astounded at the Connectivity Standards Alliance has put on test events, a lot of them, where we go and we bring devices in and we have demo environments where things are tested and we think through the different attack scenarios and where things could go wrong and how we mitigate and how we would change those. And I think that the Matter standard has done, and the group has done a really good job of thinking through those. Now, there are still some things, and I'll acknowledge, that are being worked on, like revocation. So any good part of public key infrastructure is revocation. Now, currently, the Matter specification does not support revocation. And we've made some noise on that because, you know, if something were to happen, you want to be able to revoke. Now, the practices of identity and validation should make sure that things are not compromised. But security is, as I said earlier, you have to be
moving target.
The moving target. You always have to be ready. And so I can tell you, we've already kicked off a working group on revocation, and the next release will include revocation as for Matter. And so there are things that are continually being updated, but I think that those challenges that you've spoken to, Paul, and some of those, I think, have really been thought through in very detailed ways with very good people. And I think that
Oh, did Mike freeze on us?
He did freeze. Let's see if he comes back.
Looks like it to me.
I'm never sure when he freezes. Is it like,
well, so
there he is.
Here he's coming back.
All right. Sorry, Mike. You froze there for a second.
Oh, I did. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm getting a signal that says my internet is unstable. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're back now.
Okay, great.
Whatever brilliant thought you just gave birth to, however, disappeared into the
yeah.
ether.
Yeah, okay.
One thing that I think was exciting
ahead,
about what you said that I hadn't thought about before is the concept that, since, you know, security things are happening every day, and the NIST has a feed that I've worked with before where it, you know, you can download it and it tells you everything that's happened in the security world, you know, according to companies and the threats, and it's very good stuff.
Yeah.
That now this tie-in could be there such that you could say, okay, I'm manufacturer X and I'm Matter compliant, but you could look up and say, okay, let's see how you've turned out in those NIST feeds. You know, have you been compromised a lot lately or never? Or so I think that's a nice tie-in together with, you know, essentially a streaming data feed that with the right it's too complex for me or most people to really analyze on any basis. But if you can boil that down into a star rating,
yeah,
that'll really be useful too.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it emphasizes the importance of that flexibility and it not being static, and then having good tie into the data to make sure that that there's transparency. That's another, I didn't mention that, but I think transparency is another component of labeling that's really important. Usually with the label, you have to go to the least common denominator of, you know, it's like, all right, 4 stars, but what's the transparency? And can I dig on that? And is there transparency that I can go and do? And I think transparency is certainly a really important component.
And I also think this Matter is the first big standard where you've got all the big dogs in, right?
Yeah.
It's always been, you know, Samsung is on one thing and Apple is on another,
and you know how it's going to end.
And they each have their own standards organization. And they might have another company, but if Samsung is in there, there's not going to be another TV manufacturer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll tell you, they're all in there. All the TV manufacturers are in there.
Yeah.
The cool thing I can share with you also is, Matter has already set its sight on smart commercial building. I think within the calendar year of 2023, I don't know if the standard will be out, but I think you'll see a lot of activity there where they're going to take the Matter protocol. Now it's not going to be an exact representation because smart commercial building is very different from a smart home. Not very different, but it's different. You need to think about it through a unique lens. And then they are also talking about healthcare. You think about a hospital where a hospital administrator is onboarding devices from many different manufacturers, and they want all of those devices to work together. So a hospital is another great environment where I think Matter is very relevant. And so it'll be neat to see those two take wings.
Are there any that we're coming up in the hour mark here? Are there any other questions for Mike? I have one question that I want to go out with, but I wanted to defer to the group. Are there any other questions for Mike? He's given us a really interesting talk. No? Okay, Mike, here's my question. And as you may know, like one of my passionate issues is right to repair. And one of the looming issues on Internet of Things is, of course, how do we maintain devices, keep them working in the long term, right? So, you know, manufacturer may be interested in supporting a device for 5 years with software updates, but of course that piece of hardware might have a 20 or 30-year lifespan. So we need to think about the long-term care and maintenance, care, feeding, and maintenance of our Internet of Things devices. You talked a little bit about like kind of deprovisioning or decertifying devices, but is there conversation about that of like, well, how do we open, we're going to need to open this ecosystem up to other service providers who may want to step in after the manufacturer has, basically walked off the field and say, I'll take over, I'll run these devices for you, I'll manage them. Is there anything in Matter that takes that type of ecosystem into account?
So it's a really good question, Paul. And so Matter, what Matter does is it continues, the protocol is supported through the lifetime of the device. So for example, like even if a customer of Digicert, if they were to step away and say, look, we don't want to be CSA compliant anymore, but they had already issued devices that were in the field, those devices will maintain their compliance. Now, the support side is the other tricky, and that's where your question is. And the hard thing about the answer on this, Paul, is sadly, I don't think we're there yet. I think that automotive is actually dealing with that in the most proactive way, with what they're doing with right to repair. I think we're seeing we're seeing some stuff there, but I don't think that we're there yet. What we're seeing is manufacturers are becoming more transparent with consumers to actually say, we will support this device for 7 years and then it will no longer receive updates, right? And they're putting that in the labeling. So at least they're communicating to consumers. I think the next step after that, Paul, will be then to say, okay, but what if they want to keep using it? And how do we enable a third-party service provider to come in, securely connect to the device and continue to service it? But I just don't, sadly, I don't think we're there yet, but I think that,
which I think has to do with who's in the room, right? So, in the room are makers of new stuff, right? That's one of the problems, right? They're not maker, it's not the sort of, in the automotive industry, you have this sort of whole industry of aftermarket parts and service. And, that's a whole multi-billion-dollar industry in and of itself.
And they're kind of forced to deal with it because I take my Toyota truck, I take it to a service dealer who is not Toyota. And so they're kind of forced to deal with that in automotive, where not every industry is forced to do that. And that's why I think you're seeing more proactivity there and some more.
It's going to be an issue. Mark my words.
It is. No, I see it, Paul, and it's a really, maybe we can tag team on make some noise on that, because I agree, and it's something that I see coming. I mean, it's similar to, I don't know, like 3 years ago, someone asked me what the next frontier of security was, and I was like, well, right now everybody is just securing their ecosystem. the next frontier is with IoT is they're going to start thinking about their devices and how they communicate with other devices. And that will
Yes.
really be the next frontier. And today
Yes.
we're seeing that.
Yes.
I think what you're seeing, what you're talking to is really that next frontier of where we need to go when thinking about service of products. Manufacturers right now are thinking about end of life just in terms of their support. Once
Yes.
they get that, they then need to think about ongoing, and it will be a great, it's a
Right.
problem that's coming that needs to be addressed.
But I
Right.
think it's possible with signed and attested, et cetera, software and people, the ecosystem can grow that way.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
I
that,
agree.
you know, Samsung could say, we're not going to support this TV anymore. But these people have taken it on and they're certified and
Right.
signing their software and attesting it, and it's all
If you've got a platform like Matter, right, that if you've got a sort of lingua franca, right, then it becomes much more doable to say like, okay, well, now all we just need to find a way to integrate these third parties into this ecosystem and so on. That's a lot easier than, you know, trying to do it manufacturer by manufacturer. So yeah, no, I think standardization is a step in that direction for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay.
Question. Well, thank you, Paul.
We'll have you back for sure.
I love it. Let's do it.
Yeah. And thanks everyone for coming. I did throw a link into the chat for our survey, but I'll circulate one via the MeetUp platform as well. We're going to have more. Jeff and I are going to get together. We got more talks coming up in the months ahead, and we will be sure to have Mike and Digicert back for another conversation.
Yeah, Mike asked a good question about post-quantum. We could talk about that. There's a lot of good stuff going on with post-quantum. The quick answer to that, Mike, is there are some devices that can support it, and there's a lot of work going on right now on the post-quantum. Digicert's doing a lot of work with NIST and others on the different algorithms, but would love to talk about that. So, Paul, thanks for hosting me.
Topic for our another meeting. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, thank you. Hey, everybody, thanks for coming, and we'll be back to you for 2023. So stay tuned.
see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.